Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prabhupada Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tirani Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschitya Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschitya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo. Gaura Hari Bo, Nitya Gaura Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Nitya Gaura Hari Bo, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Shri Untitled Chapter, Hari Hari Bom.
Krishna Mataji, please accept my obeisances all Vaishnav Prabhupada. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us. Bhaktin Koruta Paul, Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you so much. Mataji will introduce Her Grace Gaura Premi Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce you Her Grace Gaura Premi Devi Dasi. She joined ISKCON in 1994 and she's a second initiated disciple of His Holiness Srila Indradyumna Swami Maharaj. She's a medical doctor, having obtained an MBCHB degree from Walter Sisulu University and a specialization in general surgery from the Colleges of Surgeons of South Africa. She is currently completing her master's degree in medicine through the University of Witwatersrand, with a focus on women's health, endocrine surgery, and cancer prevention. My work with undergraduate teachings was recognized with an award from the university in 2020. She is a member of South Africa Impact Group of Devotees Doctors and the International Bhaktivedanta Medical Association, providing voluntary medical services to devotees in South Africa and across the world. She serves as a pujari at the Sri Sri Nitai Gaura Hari Mandir in Lenasia, where she also engages in leading kirtan, cooking, baking, altar decor, making book distribution services. She is completing the senior certificate Bhakti Tita diploma and Bhakti Shastri courses, and she is currently studying the Bhakti Vaibhava course through the Bhaktivedanta Vidyapita, classical Sanskrit through the Central Sanskrit University, classical Indian music with an Inad School of Music, and an amateur archer with the Archer Archery Club. So she is a very dedicated devotee and has very wonderful classes almost every week. So welcome
Thank
to
you so
Mata
much for that kind introduction, Mataji.
Dasi.
Thank you so much. You are too kind. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So today the honor is mine to speak on such an important topic, and I'm praying for all your blessings to do justice to this class, particularly as it's about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is so dear to all our hearts. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the verse that we're going to read from is from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 9, text 4. Maya tatamidam sarvam jagadavyakta murtina matstani sarva bhutani na chaham teshva avastitaha. The translation. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. So the purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is not perceivable through the gross material senses. Lord Krishna's name, form, fame, pastimes, etc. cannot be understood by material senses. Only to one who is engaged in pure devotional service under proper guidance is He revealed. In the Brahma Samhita 538, it is stated, Premanjina Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaha Sadeva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. One can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, always within himself and outside himself if one has developed the transcendental loving attitude towards him. Thus, for people, in general, he is not visible. Here it is said that although he is all-pervading, everywhere present, he is not conceivable by the material senses. This is indicated here by the word avyakta murtina. But actually, although we cannot see him, everything is resting in him. As we have discussed in the 7th chapter, the entire material cosmic manifestation is only a combination of his two different energies, the superior spiritual energy and the inferior material energy. Just as the sunshine is spread all over the universe, the energy of the Lord is spread all over the creation, and everything is resting in that energy. Yet one should not conclude that because he is spread all over, he has lost his personal existence. To refute such an argument, the Lord says, I am everywhere and everything is in me, but still I am aloof. For example, a king heads a government, which is but the manifestation of the king's energy. The different governmental departments are nothing but the energies of the king, and each department is resting on the king's power. But still, one cannot expect the king to be present in every department personally. That is a crude example. Similarly, all the manifestations that we see and everything that exists, both in this material world and in the spiritual world, are resting on the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The creation takes place by the diffusion of his different energies, and as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Vishta Bhagyam Idam Kritsnam. He is everywhere present by his personal representation, the diffusion of his different energies. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gnanghina Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarini. So, in this verse, Srila Prabhupada, in the purport of this verse, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning this a special tattva that Lord Chaitanya gave us. He mentions the inconceivable and simultaneous oneness and difference of the Lord and his energies. The name of this tattva, or truth, the reality of the world and everything that we know, is called Achintya Bed Abed Tattva. So as we said, Achintya is inconceivable and Bed Abed is both being simultaneous and different at the same time. So Lord Chaitanya synthesized this tattva as the way that we understand ourselves, the Lord, and our relationship to him. Therefore, it's the most important basis of our spiritual understanding. This tattva is actually contained in the Maha Mantra, which was also given to us as the Yuga Dharma by Lord Chaitanya. Therefore, these are the greatest gifts that the Lord actually gave to us. And we're going to discuss the Achintya Beda Bed Tattva in more detail in this class today. This tattva is so important to us, in particular in refuting the Mayavadi philosophy, which is a philosophy that actually it is, as Srila Prabhupada explains, it's actually atheism. So it's a great threat to the living entities taking to devotional service and perfecting their lives, because it distracts them away from this purpose. So this tattva is a great weapon against this Mayavadi philosophy. In addition, the tattva is also the basis of what we know as the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas is given in three concepts. Those three concepts are Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. The Sambandha is understanding who we are, who the Lord is, and what our relationship with him is. Abhideya is acting on that relationship in devotional service, and Prayojan is achieving the goal of devotional service, which is love for Krishna. So Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva is the basis of this understanding. So the Lord also gave us, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave us his Shikshastakam, which actually contains these three concepts of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. And that is the next gift that we're going to discuss of the Supreme Lord today. In addition, we're going to discuss how the Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva is giving us a place in the Indian school of philosophy. It's linked to two of the philosophical schools, the Sankhya Yoga and the Patanjali Yoga schools. And it's also giving us a place in the Vaishnav canon of philosophy. We know that there are 4 Sampradayas, and each Sampradaya has its own contribution towards Vaishnav Tattva. So our unique contribution comes through Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva. And then to conclude, we're going to see how the Lord gave these teachings to the 6 Goswamis, and in writing them, they've recorded them for posterity so that generations of Vaishnavas across the world can access all Lord Chaitanya's wonderful gifts to humanity. So let's unpack all of this. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that there are 2 energies. The Lord has 2 energies, principally, that is the spiritual energy and the material energy. The spiritual energy can be further divided into the Lord's internal energy, and that internal energy is present in the spiritual world, but also present in the material world, wherever the Lord is present and wherever his devotional service is present. That's the superior spiritual energy. Then the marginal spiritual energy is the living entities. And the living entities are also present in the spiritual world, and they're present in the material world. And when they're under the influence of the material nature, we call them conditioned. So we'll be speaking mostly about these conditioned living entities when we're discussing today. So the material energy, which is the second energy of the Lord, is real because it is the Lord's energy, but it is also temporary, which is different from the 2 spiritual energies, which are eternal. So we'll discuss how these energies are the same as the Lord in that they have their source in the Lord and are completely dependent on the Lord, but they're also different in terms of their qualities and how much of the qualities they have of the Lord, and also how they actually come about. So let's start with the spiritual energies. So the first of the spiritual energies is Shirada. She is Krishna's internal potency, and she is one with Krishna in that the energetic and the source of the energy are not ever separated. There are many places in scripture that this is explained, but we'll read the verse from Caitanya Charitamrita. The loving affairs of Sri Radha and Krishna are transcendental manifestations of the Lord's internal pleasure-giving potency. Although Radha and Krishna are one in their identity, they are separated. They separated themselves eternally. Now these 2 transcendental identities have again united in the form of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. I bow down to him who has manifested himself with the sentiment and complexion of Srimati Radharani, although he is Krishna himself. So we can see that as the energy of the Lord, Sri Radha is the same and inseparable from the Lord, but still there is a difference in that he is the source of her. As the greatest of all his energies, she's always serving him perfectly. Therefore, she is always trying to assist the living entities in how to serve him perfectly as well, which is our purpose. Now we'll consider the various expansions of the Lord that are also spiritual. They're also having the same spiritual qualities as him, full in all his opulences. But there is still a distinction in that the Lord is the source of all of them. And again, we turn to scripture, Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, Ete chamsha kalaha pumsaha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, Indrari Vyakulam Lokam, Hridayanti Yuge Yuge. There are many expansions and expansions of the expansions that are the same as Krishna in quality, but he is still distinguished as the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now we also have the Lord's names, his qualities, his pastimes, and his weapons that are all one with him as well in terms of his qualities, but different in that, again, he is their source. In the 6th canto, it says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entities, the material energy, the spiritual energy, and the entire creation are all individual substances. In the ultimate analysis, however, they constitute the Supreme One, the personality of Godhead. Therefore, those who are advanced in spiritual knowledge see unity in diversity. For such advanced persons, the Lord's bodily decorations, his name, his fame, his attributes and forms, and the weapons in his hand are manifestations of the strength of his potency. According to their elevated spiritual understanding, the omniscient Lord who manifests various forms is present everywhere. So now that we've considered the Lord's energies, his expansions, and his weapons, we consider the features of the Absolute Truth, Bhagavan, Paramatma, and Brahman. They are also given as one and different by the Achintya Beda Bed Tattva. And there's a famous verse in the 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that says, Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yaj jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdhyate. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are the same absolute truth, but they're different in the perspective. Out of the spiritual qualities of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, Brahman has the quality of eternity without knowledge and bliss. Paramatma, as the partial representation of Bhagavan, has knowledge and eternity, but not bliss. And Bhagavan, as the highest realization of these 3 features of the Absolute Truth, has eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So Srila Prabhupada gives us that famous example of the sun's rays, the sun's disk, and the sun god, so that we can understand that although these 3 features are all equal, there is a difference in the realization of these 3 features, with the highest realization and the most complete realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead being Bhagavan. So now that we've understood the higher spiritual nature and energies, we come to the marginal spiritual entities, energies, which are the living entities. So they have various relationships of oneness and difference with Krishna. Firstly, they come from the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada explains in a lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam that the living entities come from the Lord as the Son comes from the Father. So in that way, the Son is actually the same as the Father. However, there will always be a position of seniority with the Father and the junior position of the Son. And also always being individual, the Son and the Father can never be one. So in the same way, the living entities are different. In another way, the living entities are completely dependent on Krishna. So he says that they rest always within him, the way the wind rests in the sky. So in that way, we see that it seems that the wind and the sky are one, but the wind is different from the sky, and the sky is always aloof from the wind. So in the same way, although the living entities are depending completely on the Lord for their existence, he is not them and they are not him. Thirdly, the living entities are similar to the Lord in terms of having the same qualities of the Lord. They have spiritual qualities of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, but they're different in that their quantity of these qualities is very minute in comparison to the Lord. And therefore, they do not have the same potency that the Lord has to accomplish everything that he does. So Srila Prabhupada has given us many nice examples in that regard. He's told us about the drop of seawater in the ocean, the sparks and fire, and the gold in the gold mine. In all these cases, the smallest particles, like the gold, has the same qualities as the gold mine. The drop of seawater has the same ratio of salt as the ocean. And the spark has the ability to burn and to give off heat as the fire. But in all cases, the gold small particle of gold can't be equal to the great quantity of gold that the gold mine can produce. The spark can't burn to the degree that the fire can burn, and the drop of water can't exert the same force that the ocean can. So we see that these analogies are helping us to understand our position, although it is difficult, hence it's called achintya, or inconceivable. But we can see that we have a relationship with the Lord in oneness and in difference. Also, in the same way, the living entities, the material nature is also, we'll take a few ways to understand how the material nature is related to Krishna and also different from him at the same time. Firstly, the material nature is also coming from Krishna, just as the living entities are coming from Krishna. But the living entity, the material nature's functions are being carried out by the Lord's energies and not by himself directly, although he is the origin. So therefore, that is the oneness and the difference there. Then the material nature is also completely dependent on the Lord and is resting on him as the living entities are resting on him. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that the material nature is resting on him as pearls are strung on a thread. So the pearls can't form a necklace unless they are resting on this thread. So in the same way, the material energy can't function at all unless it is resting on Krishna. However, the pearls are not the thread in the same way that the material energy is not Krishna. Also, although the material energy is coming from Krishna, it doesn't have any of his spiritual qualities. Whereas the living entities have small amounts of his spiritual qualities, the material nature doesn't have any of it. It's not eternal, it's not full of knowledge, and it's not full of bliss. And lastly, the Lord is pervading the material nature completely. We know that he comes into the universes as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and he enters into each atom as Shirada Vishnu. And what can be more smaller than the atom? It means that the Lord is actually in every part of the material nature, but he says that he is completely aloof from it. So the analogy that Srila Prabhupada gives us here is how the air moves through soil, through stool, through many of the elements, but it never mixes with any of it. So in the same way, even though Krishna is in everything around us, he is simply not a part of it in terms of mixing with it. So, you know, these concepts are a little difficult to understand, but this is why we get analogies that Srila Prabhupada has very kindly given us for him to see, for us to see this inconceivable oneness and difference of the Lord in everything. And the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita that this is his mystic opulence. He's so wonderful and he's so amazing that he can be present in everything yet not be present, and he can be we can be resting in him, but we're not actually a part of him, and his energies are running everything completely and perfectly, even though he is aloof from all of this. So this is what Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport as a king in the government departments. The king doesn't personally have to be present in every department of the government. His energies are running everything for him. So in the same way, Krishna's energies are running everything for him as well. Although Srila Prabhupada calls it a crude example because the king can't actually physically be present in any way, but he's also not present in any other sense of the way his department heads have to work for him. But in Krishna's way, his energies are him. So he's actually in control of everything while he's remaining aloof. This is his mystic opulence, Yogam Aishwaram. So we can summarize all of this. It may have been a bit much to take in. So we have the Lord's internal energy, his personal expansions, his name, his form, and his weapons that have all his spiritual qualities in full, but he's still their source. And that's the difference. And then as for the living entities, they have minute qualities of the spiritual, minute quantities of the spiritual qualities of the Lord as compared to all his spiritual and his higher spiritual energies. And they also have their source in him. And then material nature doesn't have any of the spiritual qualities of the Lord, but also has its source in him. So everything has its source in the Lord. He is the supreme Lord of all. So how is the Maha Mantra related? We'll look at the spiritual energies for this. There are actually all the spiritual energies and their relationships are contained within the Maha Mantra. Firstly, when we recite the Maha Mantra in the names of Rama and Krishna, it's the same person, Krishna, but in a sound form. Srila Prabhupada says in the preface of the teachings of Lord Caitanya, that Lord Caitanya taught this Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva through the chanting of the holy names. He taught us that the holy name of Krishna is the sound incarnation of the Lord. And since the Lord and his spiritual energies are the same, there's actually no difference between that holy name and the Lord's transcendental form. Therefore, by chanting the holy name, we can associate directly with the Lord. Now, also in the Maha Mantra is the holy name of Hare. And that refers to Shirada, who is the Lord's greatest spiritual energy. And Shirada is able to bring us, the minute spiritual energies, in contact with Krishna by engaging us in devotional service, which is also one of the Lord's transcendental energies. So when we summarize it, this Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva is able to tie everything together. Us who are the minute spiritual energies are praying to Krishna in the form of his names, to his divine energy, Sri Radha, to engage us in bhakti, which is another divine energy of the Lord. So that's how these wonderful gifts of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tie in together. So now that we've understood all the oneness and difference between the Lord's different energies, we can see that even though material nature is temporary and not possessing the spiritual qualities of the Lord, it's still an energy of the Lord, and so it is very much real. And this is something that is different compared to what the Mayavadi philosophy teaches. So we discussed the Mayavadi philosophy a little bit in the beginning. Mayavadi philosophy is basically saying that this material energy, this material nature is false. It doesn't really exist. What really does exist is Brahman, which is the supreme personality, and the supreme God, which they understand as an effulgence having no personality, and the living entities, which they say has the same spiritual qualities, which we understand also from our Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva. But the difference is that in Mayavadi philosophy, the belief is that because of these spiritual qualities, the soul can actually merge or become one with the supreme Brahman. Now, the problem is that from what we've understood, being individual, the soul and the supreme can never become one again. In the same way, a father and a son can't become one after the son has been produced. Also, we can never equal the potency of the Supreme Lord, in the same way that the drop of water can never be equal in the force of the ocean, or the gold can never be equal in producing gold like the gold mine, or the sparks of fire never being able to carry out the functions of fire. So because of this flawed understanding, even when the Mayavad believers reach the impersonal Brahman after death by cultivating spiritual practices in life, they can't exist there for very long, and they fall down, as is stated in scripture, Patantiyadaha. Sometimes they even fall down in life before they even reach that spiritual goal, because they're not able to sustain their renunciation. Now, Srila Prabhupada is very forceful against this Mayavadi philosophy because of the danger that it's posing to society at large. We can see that in the way that people are very attracted to the philosophy of believing that everything is one, because it gives them the carte blanche to follow any philosophy and worship any feature, because they think that at the end, everything becomes one, so they can reach the same goal. And because of that, they're denied the treasure of devotional service and achieving liberation into the Lord's eternal pastimes, which is quite a great tragedy. So Prabhupada's mission in teaching the philosophies, especially our basis, our Achintya Bhed Bheda Tattva was so important to help the living entities realize what their real position is, that it's actually even contained in Srila Prabhupada's Prana Mantra. So the second of his Prana Mantras says that he has a particular mission against Nirvishesh and Shunyavad. So this is impersonalism, that's the Mayavadi philosophy, and voidism, which is Buddhism. So how did these two movements come about, Mayavadi and Buddhism? Because this actually leads us to how Lord Caitanya came in particular to teach us the Achintya Bheda Tattva that helps us refute Mayavadi and Buddhist philosophy. So at the time that Lord Buddha appeared, he had a particular mission. Srila Prabhupada has explained to us many times that at the time that Lord Buddha appeared, the killing of animals was rampant, utilizing the Vedic rituals as an excuse. And because of this, Lord Buddha had a particular mission to refute the Vedas, to say that their authority doesn't exist and people shouldn't be following it. In the Dasavatar Stotram, the Lord's purpose as Lord Buddha is summarized in this way there. Nindasi yagya videraha shruti jana shruti jatam sadaridaya darshita pashughatam keshavadrita buddha sharira jaya jagadisha hare. So because the followers of Buddhism are rejecting the Vedas, following Lord Buddha's teachings, they're actually atheists, because the conclusion of the Vedas is Krishna. Krishna says in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Vedesha sarvam sarver aham eva vedya vedanta vedavid eva chaha. So he's a knower of the Vedas, he compiled the Vedas, and by the Vedas he is to be known. So without the Vedic base, Buddhism was never going to be able to deliver anybody to the real goal of spiritual life. So a personality or someone was needed to come into this picture and guide the people who are now taken by Buddhism and bring them back to the Vedas somehow. And what Shiva says in the Padma Purana that this is his task. He was to introduce elements of the Vedas along with elements of Buddhism so that the people who were very much entrenched in Buddhism were not going to be too disturbed in coming back to the Vedas. So therefore, the similarities we understand now of the Mayavadi philosophy in not really having a God and in not really having a reality after death, just like Buddhism, was very important so that people would gradually be able to come back to believing in the Vedas again, because Shankaracharya, which is the incarnation that Lord Shiva took, he was introducing these elements of Buddhism, but based on the Vedas now. So at least they were coming back to the Vedas, but without understanding the conclusion of the Vedas, which is to become devotees developing pure love for Krishna. So now we have the need for personalities and philosophies that were going to the Vedic teachings and their conclusion to the people. And we enter the great Vaishnav Acharyas into the scene. So we know that there are 4 Vaishnav Sampradayas. And into these 4 Vaishnav Sampradayas, 4 very great Acharyas appeared in order to bring tattvas into existence, to bring people back to the Vedic conclusions. So these 4 Sampradayas are as follows. We have the Rudra Sampradaya, which comes from Lord Shiva. And the Acharya who appeared in that line was Vishnu Swami. Then we have the Sri Sampradaya, which is started by Lakshmi Devi after receiving instructions from the Supreme Lord. And the spiritual master who appeared to propagate the teachings of the Sampradaya is Ramanujacharya. Then we have the Kumara Sampradaya, which is like its name, it's started by the 4 Kumaras, and the Acharya who appeared in that line is Nimbaka Acharya. And then we have the Sampradaya that we are connected to, the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya, in which Lord Brahma started and in which Madhvacharya appeared. So these 4 very powerful Acharyas had a mission in order to somehow bring people from this Mayavadi understanding to an understanding of Vaishnava philosophy that would set the scene for Lord Chaitanya to come in and introduce this Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva to the people. So they're actually mentioned in the Gagra Samhita that they're incarnations of very important either incarnations of the Lord himself or of great devotees of the Lord. So Vishnu Swami is Vamanadev, Ramanujacharya is Anantashesh, Madhvacharya is Brahma, but this is according to the Gagra Samhita. I know there are other works that say that he is Vayu or Bhima, and Nimbakacharya is Sanat Kumar. So from their elevated positions, they were able to integrate portions of the philosophies of oneness with Krishna, which the Mayavadi philosophy was promoting greatly, but also to teach people that they can never become one again with Krishna. The goal of their lives is actually to engage in devotional service and then to attain liberation in the Lord's pastimes. So Lord Chaitanya appeared in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, and he, taking essential elements of the philosophies or tattvas of these other four sampradayas, he synthesized this highest and greatest understanding of tattva, of the relationship between the Lord and his energies in the Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva. So this is very important to us in particular because as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we have a slightly unique philosophy from the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya that we appeared in. Lord Chaitanya and his spiritual master and his Param spiritual master, sorry about the break. So Lord Chaitanya gave us a philosophical understanding that was giving us also a unique standpoint in the Vaishnav canon of philosophy. And this was our unique contribution to the Vaishnav theology. And this is how we can relate to the other Vaishnav schools. And we should be aware of this in terms of when people ask us what our tattva is. We should be proud of this Achintya Bheda Bhed tattva that Lord Chaitanya has given us, and how it relates us to Krishna's energies and to our eternal relationship as spirit souls. So also in giving us this tattva, Lord Chaitanya has given us a place in the philosophical schools of Indian philosophical thought. So there are 6 philosophical schools, and in particular, the school that we are related to is the Vedanta School. So this Vedanta School is divided into 3 main tattvas. The first is the Shankaracharya tattva, which we've explained already. And then the next is the tattva of Ramanujacharya, Vishishtadvaita, and the tattva of Madhvacharya, which is Dvaita. And Lord Chaitanya, using the tattvas of Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya, he synthesized the perfection of this Achintya Bheda Bhed tattva. So in that way, he's given us our entrance into the Vedic, the Indian school of philosophy. And he's also related us to 2 of the other schools of philosophy, namely Sankhya Yoga and Patanjali Yoga. So Patanjali Yoga is related to Sankhya Yoga, so we'll just discuss Sankhya Yoga. It's worth discussing because Krishna says something in Bhagavad Gita that he doesn't say very often. He says that the results of Sankhya Yoga are the same as the results of devotional service. So how is this possible, and how is Sankhya Yoga related to Achintya Bheda Bhed tattva? So let's understand what Sankhya Yoga is. There's a lot of terms, so we can ask questions and stuff at the end so that I can clarify if there's anything that is difficult to understand. So Sankhya Yoga is basically the analysis of all the elements that are in creation. And Krishna gives a summary of Sankhya Yoga as well in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, because the analysis of the body and the analysis of the soul will lead us to understanding the soul's position as the Lord's servant. And so overall, when those who study Sankhya philosophy, they understand the material body in terms of all the elements, they will also eventually come to the Lord as the basis of this material energy being its source. And this we've already discussed is actually what is Achintya Bheda Tattva. So in coming to the Lord as the source of the material energy, of spiritual energies, they'll eventually end up rendering service to the Lord. And this is what we've already discussed is the goal of the Vedas. So this is why Sankhya Yoga is giving the same result as devotional service, because it leads one to devotional service. So we've discussed now how Achintya Bheda Tattva relates to the Lord, to his names, his expansions, the energies, to the Vaishnav philosophy, Indian philosophy, and particularly to Sankhya Yoga. So how is it relating to the Vedas, actually? So the Vedic conclusion we've also mentioned earlier is Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. And Sambandha being the relationship that we have with the Lord as his servants, has Achintya Bheda Tattva as its base, because without understanding that we are the Lord's energies with a constitutional duty to serve him, we're never going to get to the point of executing devotional service, which is the next step, Abhideya, and we're never going to get to the perfection of life, which is the last step, Prayojan. So Achintya Bheda Tattva is giving us all these understandings. So Lord Caitanya, when he gave us the Shikshastakam, he's actually summarized the whole of the Vedic teachings, because in the Shikshastakam, there is also Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that all 8 verses of the Shikshastakam are actually explaining Abhideya. The first 5 verses are explaining Sambandha, and the last 3 verses are explaining Prayojan. Now, to conclude, Lord Caitanya gave the understanding of all of these tattvas to the Goswamis so that they could prepare literature and transmit this philosophy to the people of the time, but also to all of us for future generations. So he gave particularly this understanding of Sambandha and the Achintya Bheda Tattva to Sanatana Goswami. So he is known as our Sambandha Acharya, having that knowledge to transmit to us. He gave that intimate knowledge of devotional service to Srila Rupa Goswami. So he is our Abhideya Acharya. And then Raghunath Das Goswami learned from him and Swarup Damodar Goswami about the intricacies of Prayojan, and thus his writings are dealing with this highest expressions of love of God of Srimati Radharani. So in this way, Lord Caitanya has given us all this knowledge. He's given it to his disciples to give to us, but he also took this knowledge personally throughout India, and then with Srila Prabhupada throughout the world. So Srila Prabhupada has given us these gifts. In this season of giving, which is where most people are thinking about giving material gifts, the best spiritual gift that we can give ourselves is to understand and appreciate these tattvas, to assimilate it into our knowledge, and then to give it to others. And that's a gift that's really worth giving. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are there any questions? I don't see any in the chat.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for the wonderful class. Is there any questions or comments from anybody? Hare Krishna, Bhaktin Koruta Paul, is there anything you'd like to add to the class, Mataji?
Hare Krishna, thank you very much, Mataji, for the nectar from Bhajan and wonderful class. I haven't any questions because everything was very clearly and very nice explained. Maybe the other devotees. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. It's all the mercy of Srila Prabhupada.
Mataji, thank you so much for a really wonderful class. I've learned so much. It's amazing how you gave so much of information in such a short period of time.
I hope it wasn't too much.
Yeah, I'm so trying to absorb everything. Luckily, it's recorded, so I can go back and have a look and understand what you said. Thank you so much. Mataji, could you just elaborate a bit more on the Shikshastakam? You mentioned
yeah.
Maybe some of the newcomers, we just tell them what it's about, the Shikshastakam, the 8 verses. If you summarize each one,
Okay, so the Shikshastakam is essential to our understanding of the holy name. And as I explained, the holy name contains everything, actually contains everything material and spiritual, and how we can achieve the Lord. So what is notable about the Shikshastakam is that Lord Caitanya was noted as a powerful scholar of Sanskrit and of all of the schools of thought. And he was able to defeat the greatest scholars of the day. But unlike many other of the Vaishnav acharyas that we discussed that came before, he didn't leave any commentaries on scripture like they had. But what he did leave us was these 8 verses called the Shikshastakam. And devotees recite these 8 verses every day because it helps us to get a deeper understanding of everything, again, basically, that we can gain from the holy name. And by reading there's a bhashyam that was composed by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur called Sanmadaya Bhashyam. It's a very nice explanation of the Shikshastakam. So that was what I read in order to get this understanding that we can actually find so much in it. Actually, it's quite a long document, about 40 pages. But basically, he says in there that these 8 verses are containing the essential aspects of the Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. So we can understand in this way. The first verse is talking about the glories of the Sankirtan movement of the holy name, how it's able to purify the heart of the living entities, as well as how it is transcendental knowledge and bliss and eternal. So that is that spiritual nature of the Lord, who is identical with his name, that is so essential to Sambandha. And then the Lord Chaitanya further explains in the next verse how these names are unlimited as well, like the Lord, and have this great quality of mercy that they're not hard and fast rules for chanting it. That is the Lord's great mercy on us. He's giving himself to us in the form of these names, but he's giving it to us without any restriction. That was specifically because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was basically giving us the holy name without any conditions. And then we have the next explanation of our roles now, because we know that Sambandha is about the Supreme Lord, about ourselves and our relation of devotional service. So what should a living entity be like in order to receive the mercy of the Lord or to revive the eternal relationship? So that's what he mentions in the 3rd verse. He says that we must be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, devoid of a sense of false prestige and ready to offer respects to others. Then he says further in the 4th verse that we must not have desires for wealth, for followers, for the opposite sex, for anything actually in this material plane. All we should want is causeless devotional service. And then in the last verse that's explaining, which is text 5, the last verse that's explaining the Sambandha Gyan, he explains the position of the living entities in the material world, that we have fallen into the ocean of birth and death, even though we are the Lord's eternal servants. And so we need him to rescue us from this ocean of birth and death and fix us at his lotus feet. So that is bringing us to the point of Abhideya. Abhideya is actually, he said, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it's in all these verses because as it leads us to the conclusions of what the Lord is and what we are, it's naturally leading us to devotional service. And then speaking about devotional service and the perfection of devotional service, we have the next 3 verses where Lord Chaitanya is explaining what happens to us when we're engaging in devotional service, specifically by chanting the holy names. He says that our eyes become decorated with tears of love when we chant. Our voice gets choked up. Our hair stands on end. We feel the separation between us and the Lord to be like a single moment is like 12 years or more. And at the end, of course, this unconditional love for the Lord, where whether he treats us nicely or treats us badly, we will always be his servants. So that's how that whole philosophy of Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojan, it's all contained in the Shikshastakam, and it's very important that we can meditate on this all the time, so we have that kind of understanding when we're chanting about what we're actually trying to achieve. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
So if there's no other comments or question, Mataji, maybe we'll give a minute or so if there's anybody has a question or a comment.
Okay.
And then we can end with some kirtan, Mataji, if you don't mind.
No, sure.
Yeah, we'll just wait just a minute. Hare Krishna, Aditi Mataji or Bhaktin Karuna Shakti Mataji, is there any questions or comments? Mataji, I think we're okay for today. Thank you so much. We hope that you can give us class again soon.
Thank you for
really
the opportunity.
appreciate your dedication. Thank you so much. All God's Shri Prabhupada.
All God's Shri Prabhupada.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Maybe we can do Nrsimha Pranam this time.
Yes, Mataji.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Radha Radha Daine. Radha Radha Daine. Hiranyakashi Purvakshaham. Hiranyakashi Purvakshaham. Shilatankana Kalaye. Shilatankana Kalaye. Ito Nrsimha, Parato Nrsimha. Ito Nrsimha, Parato Nrsimha. Yato yato yami tato Nrsimha. Yato yato yami tato Nrsimha. Gahir Nrsimha, Hridaye Nrsimha. Gahir Nrsimha, Hridaye Nrsimha. Narasimha Madim, Sharanam Chapradhe. Narasimha Madim, Sharanam Chapradhe. Avakarikam Varenakam Adhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanuvringam Keshavajita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Avatarakam Varenakam Adhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanuvringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Nrsimhadev 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 Jaya Nrsimhadev Jaya Nrsimhadev 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 Jaya Nrsimhadev Jaya Lakshmi Nrsimha Jaya Lakshmi Nrsimha Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha Jaya, 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 Prahlad Naraj, Prahlad Naraj, Prahlad Naraj, Jaya Prahlad Naraj, Jaya Prahlad Naraj, Prahlad Naraj, Prahlad Naraj, Jaya Prahlad Naraj, Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Lakshmi Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki jai, Bhakta Prahlad Maharaj ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Krishna
And
Maji, thank you
everybody,
so much.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
so much. Please accept humble obeisances of Prabhupada.
Please send humble obeisances and blessings to Prabhupada.